On the 30th of June of this year, I saw a headline by The Sun talking about how proud they were about getting refugees arrested for having a Just Eat job. And I saw this and I was absolutely shocked at how The Sun saw this as an achievement. Now, I know most people wouldn't agree with this headline and think that that's a good thing, but if you do agree with it, let me just tell you why this is a problem. First, just to paint the picture, asylum seekers will get £49.18 per person per week if the accommodation that they're staying in doesn't provide meals. And if food is provided, they will only get around £9.95 per person per week. Now, obviously, this is not a lot of money at all, but to put this into perspective, a lot of the housing have rat issues, and if you want to buy rat poison, you'd have to wait a week before you can buy the poison if you're making £9.95 a week. Also, if you're making £49.18, you'll at least be spending £12 on food, according to the BBC, which they say is the least amount you can spend on food per week, which will still be difficult not only to spend that little, but also to survive on a weekly basis with that food, seeing as the average Brit spends £43.33 per week, according to the government. Which, if an asylum seeker spent this much, they would only be left with £5.85. Now, what do you imagine you can do in a week with between £5 and £9 left? Probably not a lot at all. Now imagine what it's like for asylum seekers trapped in terrible housing with no money to live on, barely surviving each day, and stripped of the basic right to work and to build a better life. It's definitely not good at all. Now onto the housing. Now I've already said that asylum housing is bad, but how bad is it really? Here is an article on the UK Parliament website from the 31st of January 2017 saying that asylum seeker housing is a disgrace. On the 21st of March 2021, Independent called the housing horrible. And the Human Rights Watch said families seeking asylum face dire conditions on the 14th of September 2023. The list goes on to highlight just how dire the housing conditions are. Reports describe poorly maintained accommodation, infested with rats, with a lack of privacy, and severely overcrowded. Residents also face limited access to basic facilities like kitchens, as well as inadequate heating and ventilation. Also, if you're complaining about the $5 billion spent on refugees each year, consider this. In 2018, there were about 31.6 million taxpayers in the UK. That means that the cost per taxpayer is around 5 billion divided by 31.6 million, which is about £158 per year. Which, if you divide that by the amount of days in a year, that is around 43 pence per day, or about £14 a month. For comparison, the average Brit spends more than that on alcohol alone each month, not to mention cigarettes. Now, if refugees were allowed to work, they wouldn't need as much support, and the overall cost to the public would drop significantly. Plus, they'd be contributing to the economy, possibly through VAT, and they'd also be delivering your food through food services like Just Eat. So instead of complaining, maybe consider that they could be contributing, not only contributing to the economy, but also delivering the food that you're too lazy to get. So most people complain about asylum seekers not contributing to the economy. But when they have jobs that allow them to contribute to the economy through that, people get mad. So what about economic migrants? The people who only come to this country to sit on the dole and take advantage of the UK's economy. Well, the first point is that refugees get checked to make sure that their claim is valid, which would already largely reduce the amount of people who come to this country for work and who aren't actually refugees. But also to bring up an amazing point that another YouTube channel called Jimmy the Giant brought up. Why would anyone leave the country that they've lived in their entire life just to risk crossing a dangerous sea, only to end up in a poor asylum housing and possibly take a low-paying job while also facing the risk of an arrest and getting deported? It doesn't really make much sense. So to the people who are proud of the achievement, you did absolutely nothing except worsen the lives of people who are already living in terrible conditions, and I hope you feel terrible for it.